has a business background. So from day one in politics, Mr. Sharif has always believed in creating a modern economy for Pakistan as a way of progress. So therefore you see that the first government, for 2 years we were in the government 90 to 92. Pakistan was the first country in South Asia to start economic reforms, deregulation, liberalization, privatization. And at that time Indians did not even know the meaning of these reforms. 2 years later, 1.5 years later, Manmohan Singh, who was then probably finance minister, he was asked by his Narasimha Rao, the prime minister, to contact Mr. Sartaj Aziz, who was the finance minister, and to learn from Pakistan's economic reforms. And India introduced the economic reforms we introduced here in 1991, 2 years later, and they have consistently continued to follow those policies, and look where they have gone. But in Pakistan, unfortunately, we had these jerks or the turnarounds. After 1 year, the government was dismissed, had to resign, and then another government, then another 2-year government, and then 2-year government, and all these policy inconsistencies, reversals have not allowed us to reap the benefits of the reforms which we started. Then we were the first ones in South Asia to build motorway. Indians probably did not even know the spelling of the motorway. We were the first ones to build new airports, Karachi and Lahore, in 90s. India has just built new Delhi airport very recently. We were the first ones to lay down fiber optic based digital telecom backbone in Pakistan, early 90s, when in India there was no such backbone at that time. So all these modern economic interventions were made. In 98, when we launched Vision 2010, I remember there was a conference in Colombo by World Bank of South Asian economists. So when I presented the details of our Vision 2010, so Indian economists were surprised that how come Pakistan had such an a progressive economic agenda, and we are overlooking this dimension of economic planning, because at that time we were saying that world is now moving from industrial revolution to knowledge revolution age, and we need to have a paradigm shift in our economy and build new foundations for knowledge economy. And the roadmap had been very clearly laid out in every area, infrastructure, social sectors, energy, and everything. And if unfortunately, after the 99 Musharraf came, he abandoned it. But if he had just followed what was done as a roadmap, laid down as a roadmap, Pakistan would not be in this condition where it is. To share with you just one little episode of our Vision 2010, which got continuity, and you can see the impact this has had in higher education. This whole PhD scholarship scheme was one of the projects which we had launched in July 99, and because Dr. Atar Rahman was on one of our committees for science and technology, he knew these projects. So when Vision 2010 was frozen by General Musharraf, after some time when Atar Rahman Sahab became Minister for Science and Technology, because he knew those projects which had been launched, so he revived them. So except for higher education PhD program, all other projects were initially frozen and then discontinued. So we faced the crisis we faced. So what I'm saying is that all the things which were started in the past could not materialize because of our political history. And it's time to correct those mistakes of the past, and unless we have the right balance and we have the right economic focus for our economy, we will not be able to move forward. I remember in 2007, probably it was October or sometime September, October probably. I read a front page story in Dawn, which had analyzed different political parties' manifestos. And what it said was that, what an irony, the party which has the dream team to fix Pakistan's economic crisis will not be allowed by Musharraf to come into power. And the party which does not have iota of imagination on what are the problems and crisis of Pakistan's economy is in hand in gloves with General Musharraf and is all set to come into power through NRO. So, and you have seen that, as a result, in 3 years we saw 4 finance ministers, no clue of economic management. The fourth year going with double-digit inflation. The third year going with 2.5% growth rate, and with population also growing 2%, it's almost effectively real terms zero growth rate. Whereas if you look at Asia, the whole Asia is on a high growth platform. China, Malaysia, Korea, even in South Asia, India has a high growth rate, Bangladesh has a higher growth rate, Sri Lanka has a higher growth rate, and we are, unfortunately, at a very low growth with high inflation, kind of a stagflation, which is very detrimental for any society or country. So this economy to us is the number one challenge we face, and I think here also we must understand that one of the silver linings of Pakistan's economy is that it is 50% structural and 50% perception related. We are very sensitive to perception index of our economy, because all the money which Pakistani investors pull out from Pakistani market, they normally do not invest in long-term projects abroad. They just park their funds in Middle East. And as soon as they have some positive signals, they can equally, these funds can come back with the same speed as which they go out. So our negative perceptions right now are overrated. If we can correct these negative perceptions about Pakistani economy to their actual, to reality, if we can only discount them from overrating to the reality, that would be a great positive signal to the market, because it will look like Pakistan is improving, making a lot of improvement. And I think in 6 months to 1 year we can restore confidence first of our local investors, and if any government can provide good governance, can provide merit-based appointments to the key economic managers, and can also undertake some of the reforms in our administrative structures, in all likelihood, then that signal will go to the Pakistani expatriate communities who have a lot of resources, who, mind you, in 1991, for the first time, we saw that Pakistanis from Canada, from Europe had started to come back to Pakistan with the all economic reforms which were introduced at that time. So local Pakistanis, expatriate Pakistanis can together build that momentum or take Pakistan to a level where then we can start attracting investments from abroad. So I think that is not an issue, that how will Pakistan get investment. Why? Because Pakistan is in the market of 180 people. In 2040 and beyond, as I said, it is going to grow beyond 350 million and is likely to become the 5th most populous country. So it's just demographics give it a big advantage in terms of a future potential market. Only thing we need to do is create the right enabling environment, right policies, and right framework and right implementation. We have rule of law, and we should take effective measures against corruption, and I think, and security. Probably Pakistan will be all right in 3 to 5 years. The problems can be all fixed. So how to fix economy is a fundamental challenge, and who can fix the economy, I think, should again be a question which we have to all understand and try to factor into our choices for future. Extremism is another major issue, and this also goes back to our political history. I'll give you one example. In 1985, National Assembly, there were about 50 members from religious parties with different backgrounds. But then, in 4 elections, what we saw that the Pakistani politics developed into a 2-party political system, and in 97 election, there were just 4 members from religious parties. 85% representation went to the 2 parties, and that was a pattern which eventually maintained itself from 88, 90, 93, 97. If you combine PPP, PML-N numbers, so you had almost 80-85% of the total members of the assembly. And unlike India, where the politics was fragmenting into regional politics and local politics, Pakistani politics was consolidating on a national platform with 2-party system. And I think it was very healthy given our problems we have in the past. But unfortunately, again, the martial law tried to then divide all the parties and weaken the national mainstream parties to discredit them. As a result, today you see that we are at a point where we have a loose coalition, and again, the attempt is to create another hung parliament. Because, hung parliament suits everybody. Hung parliament is the best guarantee to keep status quo. They are wanting not to allow any party take majority, and, and many interventions have been made. So, allowing extremism and this violence to be addressed through political reforms, through administrative reforms will be a key challenge for us. How do we deal with this war against terror, which unfortunately was not negotiated by the representatives of the state. It was one man who negotiated the war against terror, and now his own former corps commanders have come on record and said that we don't know what were the terms of war against terror. We don't know on what terms Pakistani airfields were given to foreigners. So, here you have a situation where even a country like Kyrgyzstan, if it gives a base to United States, it negotiates. If a country like Philippines gives a base to United States, it negotiates. And we were so liberal and so generous that we were dishing out our air bases, for foreign use to foreign armies and militaries, and we never asked them, of all this operation, what would be the fallout on Pakistan, and who will bear the cost of this fallout, and how will we go about, fixing these problems. So we are into it, and yesterday Mr. Sharif has again said that if government wants to make US-Pakistan terms of engagement transparent, and if it wants to renegotiate from position of strength with United States, how should we proceed forward? He has offered his unconditional support, that we will give government all the support it needs to do that, because that we need to do in order to fix our local problems, this security and extremism problem. We have an energy problem, which is a major problem now. Load sheddings, because in last 10 years no major energy project was launched, even though billions of dollars came in 5 years in the last years of Musharraf regime after 9/11, but no major infrastructure project was undertaken. That was the best time they could put up a hydel project. That was the best time they could do coal project. All the money that was there, but no project was undertaken. So today more than 70% of our energy portfolio is dependent on thermal energy. So every time the price of oil shoots to $100 a barrel or close to $100 a barrel, it becomes unaffordable. We cannot sustain the burden it puts on our balance of payments, because that really takes our import bill very high. Our hydel energy remains at 6,000 megawatt, and that has become also very questionable, because the capacity of the reservoirs has greatly reduced. Just to give you example of Tarbela, which had about 11.5 million acre feet reservoir capacity, in last 35 or 30 years has now come down to about 5.5 or 5 million acre feet. It's lost half of its reservoir capacity due to silting. There is a 200 feet high and 40 kilometer long delta of silt in the lake or reservoir which is at Tarbela. So we've lost it. So if Basha Dam even comes in 10 years or 12 years, it would not add any new capacity. It will only account for some of the capacity we have lost to silting in our existing, three projects, mainly Tarbela and Mangla. So that is the major challenge. I think that we need to have a consensus on a hydel project. We need to invest in our coal projects. We need to modernize our existing thermal projects. Again, in last 10 years, the tragedy is none of the public sector WAPDA power generation thermal units were modernized. The turbines there we have are the lowest efficiency turbines in the world, and nobody made any effort to modernize them and have higher efficiency turbines. Then there is the issue of gas supply. In 10 years, we dished out CNG stations like hell. They were used as political patronage permits. So you have these thousands of CNG stations all over the country which are consuming a major chunk of your natural gas, but then you have not added any new supply. So now we are at a position that if you run your CNG stations, you have to shut your industry. If you want to run your industry, you have to either shut CNG stations or you have to cut the domestic supply. Because you cannot cut the domestic supply, it has a political cost, then you have to alternately shut your industry and CNG stations. So there is this, whole imbalance. So again, I'll go back and say that in Vision 2010, we had developed a very integrated energy plan, that how are we going to integrate gas, thermal, hydel, and other alternate means of energy for next 12 to 15 years. So this is a major problem. We have an issue of governance. Again, on governance, it is not a rocket science. You do not know, many young Pakistanis do not know, we inherited the same problem in our regimes. Every time, PPP was in government, they used government jobs as a political bribe. So all the state enterprises were stuffed with thousands of jialas, were just given jobs as a political bakshish. So all these public sector banks and corporations were in great crisis. And if you look at the banking sector, in '97, we were able to turn around the public sector banks very successfully. In the previous government, again, we had privatized Muslim Commercial Bank. At that time, there was a great hue and cry made when we started privatization process, but in 20 years it has stood the test of transparency. The deals were taken to courts and not a penny could be produced. But as a result, you see that MCB has added more jobs. MCB has paid more to the national exchequer than it could ever do in 100 years staying as a public sector bank that it has done in 10 years. So that is a success story. For National Bank, Habib Bank, United Bank, we invited bankers from Bank of America, Citibank, senior bankers, put them as heads, gave them administrative autonomy, made the laws to limit the role of labor unions, and we gave independent regulatory role to the state bank. As a result, within 3-4 years, those banks were again standing on their feet. They became viable, and then later on the basis of that reform, Habib Bank was privatized, UBL was privatized, because that restructuring had been done. So to fix PIA and make PIA a profitable organization is not a rocket science. You need a professional management which you need to give, and you need to give them the political support so that there is no interference from outside, and professionals can certainly do it, just like they have done in Malaysia. The Malaysia Air is a state airline, but it has been turned around to become a very profitable model airline of Asia. Railways across the border in India are running as a profitable service. Why cannot it run in Pakistan if it is run professionally? So governance is an issue. In last 3.5 years, we have lost about $12 billion in losses in the state enterprises. So if we can only cut them by half, that's a lot of money. $6 billion a year in 3 years, $2 billion a year is more than carry lugar money on which our government had been promising us a very good future. So all these problems which we have are doable, solvable, and that is the silver lining. None of these problems is one which cannot be solved. In the past, we have solved many of these problems, and many other countries have also solved some of the problems we face today. So that only requires the right political environment. It requires the right leadership, which has the vision, which has the capability, which has the competence, and stability. I think in 3 to 5 years we can turn around the country. And that is where I would like to conclude, that when we look at Pakistan, we must distinguish between weather factors and the climate factors. The weather factors relate to the performance of the regime, and they are very dismal. They are very negative right now. And you may very well have a negative view of Pakistan based on those weather factors. Just as in Oxford, you can have a patch of bad weather. You can have a snowstorm. You can have a hailstorm, or you can have some other weather disaster which may be there for 5 years or 10 days or 15 days. But then once it goes, you have sunshine and things get back to normal. You rebuild the things and they become again. They stand on their feet. But the problem is if the ecosystem goes wrong. And those are the climate factors. The climate factors of any system relate to its long-term survivability. If you look at the weather factors, while they are dismal, fortunately in case of Pakistan, I believe that all the climate factors are on positive trajectory. And what are those climate factors on the basis of which any state survives, or which determines survivability of the state? One is rule of law and independence of judiciary. This is the most fundamental concept of statecraft, that states, countries cannot survive, they cannot become successful without rule of law in their country. Now, if you look at our recent history, in past 2-3 years, for the first time in our history, we see an ascendancy, that the role of the judiciary is on rise, independent judiciary is gaining ground day by day, rule of law movement has popular support. These are positive signs. If rule of law and judiciary was on descending path, I would be concerned. But I am hopeful because it is moving forward. Number two, societies which have freedom of expression never die. Now, if you look at the freedom of expression index, again in Pakistan, the media is gaining more and more power with every passing day. The status quo forces are very fearful of this new role of media, and they continue to attack media to deny them their growing space. But then what happens? We have instances like Wali Babar, we have instances like Salim Shahzad, but have they deterred media, or have they stopped media from doing what they are doing? As a matter of fact, the media has continued to even move forward despite all these setbacks. So that is again a positive sign. When was in Pakistan extension given to army chief debated on in the media or in the television channels? I have been part of a couple of talk shows in which very openly people question why was extension given to the army chief. Now this is something new. This was considered as a forbidden land for us, as a civil society, to discuss these matters which they always said are very sensitive and very security related. So much so that people could not even name the institutions in the media, and it was always said Hassas Idara. Ek Hassas Idara, nobody could take the name of ISI. It would always be mentioned as a Hassas Idara. But now, all the role of these military institutions is very openly debated in our media. So the debate is opening. So that is a positive sign. 3, you will not come across any country which has collapsed or failed where there is consensus on the fundamentals of statecraft. We have managed, despite our differences, to have a new consensus on 18th Amendment, which to me is a bigger consensus than the 71 consensus of 73 Constitution when it was made in 1973. Because in 1973, there was the backdrop of East Pakistan tragedy. People's Party had 2/3 majority. They could do it by themselves. Opposition had to tag along in the spirit of national reconstruction. So there was a compulsion of the events in which we had that consensus. But there was no such compulsion this time. Everybody was free. No party had absolute majority. And we saw that everyone came together and we were able to have a consensus constitutional amendment to resolve provincial autonomy issues and some other issues. So that is a positive sign. We have consensus on National Finance Commission. All the provinces came together and were able to decide how the resources should be distributed. This is again a positive sign. Then lastly, we have an emerging and engaging civil society in Pakistan. Now, no society fails where your citizenry is becoming more engaged and is becoming more informed and is becoming assuming more role about future of their country. So if there was a withdrawal, if people were not getting space, I get every day now dozens of emails from professionals, very educated people, doctors, engineers, IT profession walas, or financial sector walas, that we want to join PML-N, we want to play a role in politics. So this is a new thing. This never happened in the past. So this is a positive sign that our educated people are now trying to play a role and be part of the system. So With this, I would like to conclude that, Pakistan has its share of challenges. It is, likely that in the near future we will have to make some tough choices. But then the things are not all that bad as they look if we can make the right decisions as a nation. And the most important decision, I think, would be in the next elections for the people to make that which party they vote for, which party they bring into power. And I think that will determine the future of Pakistan. And in question-answer session, I have a few thoughts on that, and I'm sure someone will ask me some question which will enable me to share my thoughts on that what are some of the pitfalls and challenges we are facing from uneducated people to be mindful so that they make the right choices and do not make the wrong choice. But I stop here with this, verse, as some poet has said, कि खुदा करे कि मेरे एक भी हम वतन के लिए हयात जुर्म ना हो, जिंदगी वबाल ना हो, और खुदा करे कि मेरी अर्ज़ पाक पर उतरे वो फसले गुल जिसे अंदेशा ज़वाल ना हो.